In our politics lead, the other man, then teenager, allegedly in the room, according to Brett Kavanaugh's accuser, Professor Ford, is breaking his silence. His name is Mark Judge. He's a former classmate of Kavanaugh's who denies that the incident ever took place. Judge says he has no memory of the incident, that he has nothing to offer the Senate Judiciary Committee. According to a new letter his lawyer wrote to the committee, quote, Brett Kavanaugh and I were friends in high school, but I do not recall the party described in Dr. Ford's letter. More to the point, I never saw Brett act in the manner Dr. Ford describes. But Judge's writings about his hard days of partying while in high school with Brett Kavanaugh are drawing fresh scrutiny given Ford's accusation that both Kavanaugh and Judge were, quote, stumbling drunk that evening. CNN's Jessica Schneider reports.
Testimony from Brett Kavanaugh's high school classmate Mark Judge in demand by Democrats.
I think it's important that we hear from witnesses, not least of which is Mark Judge.
How could we want to get the truth and not have Mr. Judge come to the hearing and be asked questions?
Professor Christine Blasey Ford says Mark Judge was in the room at a house party when she alleges a 17-year-old Brett Kavanaugh pinned her down, tried to take off her clothes, and put his hand over her mouth to prevent her from screaming. Ford says Judge witnessed everything. Judge, now an author and filmmaker, told the Weekly Standard Ford's accusation is absolutely nuts. Kavanaugh has also forcefully denied any incident. Judge's own memoir on addiction depicts the heavy drinking and hard partying of Georgetown Prep students at the time Kavanaugh was there in the early 1980s. But it does not recount any incident such as what Ford alleges. In Wasted, Tales of a Gen X Drunk, Judge writes how the all-boys high school was swimming in alcohol, and he was shocked they got away with it.
One only needs to look at the writings of Mark Judge, who was the other person present, to know that he wrote about how stumbling drunk he and other members of Georgetown Prep were repeatedly, routinely. This was part of their culture.
Judge even seems to allude to Brett Kavanaugh in this passage from the memoir. Do you know Bart O'Kavanaugh? One character asks another. Yeah, he passed out on his way back from a party. Both Kavanaugh and Judge were varsity athletes at the prestigious all-boys Catholic high school outside Washington, D.C. Captions and quotes inside their class yearbook allude to parties and women. 100 kegs or bust, written on Kavanaugh's yearbook page. On another page, do these guys beat their wives? And this one, prep parties raise question of legality. Judge's personal page reads, certain women should be struck regularly like gongs. Judge has even waded into conservative politics, writing several articles for the Daily Caller. He's written about former President Obama, saying he seems to be a woman and a feminist one at that. And Judge took on the topic of feminism in a 2013 book review, writing, the bogus war on women is really nothing but liberal women acting out against bad fathers. The anger of the feminists has grown more acute. Nothing short of a matriarchal utopia will suffice. It's easier than admitting what really ails you. And we've talked to a friend of Kavanaugh's who tells us Kavanaugh may have drank beer in high school, but she says he was never out of control. That same friend saying Judge, on the other hand, was a loudmouth and a lot wilder. But this person had no knowledge of the party where Ford alleges she was sexually assaulted by Kavanaugh. And of course, Mark Judge also says he has no memory of this incident and therefore says he will not be testifying before the Senate Judiciary Committee. Jake?
All right, Jessica Schneider, thanks so much. Take a listen to the Senate Minority Leader, Senator Chuck Schumer, discussing Mark Judge and whether he should testify on Monday.
It certainly makes sense for one witness to be Mr. Mark Judge. How could we want to get the truth and not have Mr. Judge come to the hearing and be asked questions?
And Senator Leahy said that to me just a few minutes ago. What's the strategy here? Why? I mean, Judge has already said, he told the Weekly Standard last week he has no memory of this. Right. This didn't happen. He said it again in a letter. Clearly, he's not going to provide some sort of corroborating evidence for Professor Ford. Why do Democrats want him to testify so much?
I mean, I suppose part of it is, if I'm a little bit cynical about it, asking him questions about the high school drinking and all of this so that he would have to answer truthfully to those and talk about these things that they did in high school.
So the culture.
Yeah, I think that would be the bolstering attempt. But for both Kavanaugh and Judge, if this is their story, all they can do is come and say, I did not do this thing. And Judge can say, I don't know him to act like this, and I never saw him act like this. And they can say that over and over again, and that's about all that they can do. And I do think it is dangerous to go down a path where if the standard is you have to prove you weren't at a party sometime in 1982, the location and number of people at which we don't exactly know, or date of which we don't know, that becomes a really nearly impossible standard to hit. And all you can do is go and say, if you believe honestly this never happened, say it never happened.
Am I being exceedingly cynical when I think that the reason Democrats want Mark Judge to testify is because he's a horrible character witness?
Ding, 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 ding.
And that they want him, and they want to try him as if he is up for the Supreme Court because he's written.
I'm glad that your cynicism surpasses mine
Objective.
sometimes.
Oh, it's way past yours. What he has written and said is far more offensive than anything Brett Kavanaugh has ever said, and they want to make him Exhibit A.
First off, he is the only eyewitness to this event, if in fact it happened. A huge part of the Kavanaugh defense is he's such a great guy. He's a better Catholic than I am. He's a better American than you are. Just ask him. It's baloney. Okay, it's baloney.
What's baloney?
Brett Kavanaugh used the power of the Office of Independent Counsel, he worked for Ken Starr, to reopen the investigation of the suicide of Vince Foster. Now, I knew Vince. I worked with him. He committed suicide. It was a tragedy. That was investigated by the Park Police, by the first special counsel, Robert Fisk, by the Senate, by the House, by the Secret Service. All said the obvious. The poor man took his own life. He reopened it, spent millions of dollars, and tormented the Foster family in the most vicious, cruel abuse of power I think I've ever seen in 30 years. And he should be held to account for that. That's part of his character, too. If he would do something that horrible, I don't know what he was like in high school, but I know what he was like when he had power in that office, and he
We
tormented
had a whole
that poor
hearing
family.
where we could discuss all those things, where he was under oath.
That goes to character, doesn't it?
It does go to character, and yes, I do think that Mark Judge would be a terrible character witness. Yes, as boring as many of the, most of the testimony already was, I think this would actually be entertaining. And of course, we live in a day and age of reality TV with the current president. What I think is interesting, I did not know that about what you just shared, but we talked ad nauseum about how Brett Kavanaugh's testimony made me feel, listening to him respond to Senator Hirono or to Senator Harris or to Senator Booker. The only three people of color on the committee was also like it was troubling. So to me, I do want to hear someone else who can talk about his character, even if it was in high school. There are other things that are present day and more recent that I think speak to his character more definitively than this moment.
Well, to be fair, Harris also launched an attack that went nowhere. It was
far from an attack.
Speculative and silly and fact-checked within an inch of its life, and he has a right to speak up against that.
I think it's interesting. The only time we question people's credentials, the only time we call into question whether or not it's silly or it was founded on good principle is when it is a woman or a person of color sitting in the United States Senate. That is really frustrating to me.
She was fact-checked the same as I am fact-checked every day when I sit in public, and that's fine. She's perfectly capable of dealing with that.
His response to her asking questions where she had good reason to believe what she was asking. I know her personally. I know that she did not launch.
And you have more information than the fact-checkers had.
That's not true either. But what is so interesting is she just said, "Did you do this?" And he said, "It depends on who you talk to. Who told you that?" He could have just said no. And he went through this whole rabbit.
This is the whole thing about whether or not he talked.
He met with someone from one of Trump's lawyers.
I think what he did was he went. It's a large law firm, and he went to check whether he had talked to anybody from his law firm without first saying that he had.
That's very nice in how you're framing it, but that is not.
I just want to get back to the story right now about Professor Ford and Josh. Is there what are you hoping for on Monday? What's the best thing that
there is nothing good. There's nothing good. This is a circus of the highest order. It should have been prevented. It was very preventable. This is a very regrettable situation, and I think the handling of all of this from July on is a real problem. What is the most likely outcome Monday is that we again hear a he said, she said. You again hear from Democrats that they want to delay more. Now, could that have something to do with this? Sure, but so did all the document requests up until last week. So did all the Bush document requests before that. The name of the game from a tactical standpoint for justice is to try to delay the nomination as much as you possibly can. That's been like that since the beginning of Supreme Court hearings. So this is not all part of just fact-finding. This is a tactical manipulation of the system. Now, they do need to get to the bottom of this. Monday's important for a whole range of issues.